got the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You got a right to an attorney prior to or during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?
When the wolf is at your door, your running's over, that's for sure. He already knows all about you. Cut you down, no matter by you. Now you better walk the line. Real life, real
Warning. This episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast, may contain descriptions of acts of violence or that of a sexual nature and should be for people that are 18 years or older. Heed my warning, people. I do not get the facts of these cases off of the internet or from some television show. The facts I'm retelling you were presented to me by the victims of the crimes or the perpetrators who committed the crimes against the victims. My descriptions of the crime scenes, what I saw with my own two eyes. If you're going to get offended, please turn this podcast off now. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. And as always, I'm your host, Woody Overton. Today, we're going to be starting season 11 of Real Life, Real Crime. It's because all you lifers rock and you keep supporting us, and I appreciate it. Stay tuned at the end of the show for some Real Life, Real Crime and my new podcast, Scorched Justice announcements. So, this story is old school. It's just about as old as you can get. It's about as hard as you can get. And I have all the material for it, which is different than most of the stories in the past. But we're going to call it Mo. M-O. And the story begins on May 13th of 2005, 17 years ago this week. Okay. I was working as a detective for the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, and my partner at the time was Brian Smith. Now, you've heard me talk about Brian a lot in the past on episodes, and he and I had a long history together, if you would. I first met him when we were at the LSU Police Academy, and Brian was from Albany, Louisiana, and y'all, that's in the far east side of Livingston Parish. Small town, not so small anymore, but it was small back then. And he's a graduate from Albany High School and, basically knew all the people there. But we met at the police academy, became fast friends. And then I was at another department for another year and a half. And then I transferred over to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office in Uniform Patrol. And Brian Paul was one of the first people I saw. My first day there, I had to go qualify at the range, and he was already on the SRT team. And I'll never forget it. The SRT team was training inside at the range, and I came in to qualify, and he got out of the line, gave me a big hug. We've been jamming ever since, right? So we would go on. I would get assigned to work Uniform Patrol with him out the gate, if you will. And we just cut our teeth together, and we came up, and he made detective right before I did. A lot of war stories, a lot of learning on the job together in many different capacities, including SRT. He taught me a lot about that, and he would go on from detectives to be the lead trainer for the sheriff's office, and that was his full-time job. And then later on, but now actually today, he's the chief criminal deputy for the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, and so, which is high as you can get. And our aspirations unless you were the sheriff. So, but back then we were young detectives, and I can't say that young. I mean, we were experienced, but we had both had other partners that we trained underneath, and then we got moved to some different partners, some that had a little more experience than us, and it didn't take long with the work ethic and loving to get into shit like we did. I mean, we didn't sit around in the office, right? We were all about chasing bad guys, making great cases, and it was just a great time. I would really wish I could go back and do it all over again, right? But we had been partners for a little while, and I know y'all heard me talk about him on the Double Clutch, my very first episode I ever did on Real Life, Real Crime. He was my partner on that case. But we were partners working the night shift in May of 2005. And what would happen was you had your day shift detectives that would come out. There were 8 of us total. Day shift detectives would come out. 6 of them would work days, and then they would work from like 8 to 4. And your night shift detectives would come out at 2:00. Okay. And one of you would work from like 2 to 10, and the other one would cover or be on call, if you were. You'd both go in at 10. Would you take turns on who would be on call? Like if something happened, detective worthy, if you will, and you would go out. Now, Brian and I had an agreement that, and we were experienced enough that unless it was a homicide or something, major, like a rape or whatever, a major case, if he had the night shift part, he wouldn't call me out. If I had the night shift part, we're covering for each other, I wouldn't call him out. But on this case, at 4:00 in the morning, Brian Paul got a page from the radio room to call him. And he called them and they said, look, we got a shooting on Ed Brown Road and 2 people are down. So Brian Paul tells him to page me, and I get the page. I call him. He said, we got a roll house. He says, it's the real deal. We got 2 down, probably at least 1 deceased. Now, I lived on the far other side of the parish, as far as you could get. I lived up in Watson. So it would take me about 35, 40 minutes to get there, no matter how fast I drove. Meanwhile, units had already responded to the scene, and by the time I made it to my car, listening to the radio, I heard Brian Paul say he was 1097 on the scene. So he had to. Now he lived in Albany, not 10 minutes away from where the shooting happened, but he had to get up and get dressed and roll out. So I hear him go 1097 on the scene, and they 1033 tac 2, which means nobody could talk until he cleared it. And then took him a couple of minutes, and he came back. He said, you can clear tac 2, send in medical. We've got 1 deceased and 1 that's shot, right? So I called him, and he said, man, you got to get here. It's a bad one. And come to Ed Brown and right by Drake Road. Now, I'm going to give y'all some geographical history on this. Ed Brown Road runs from Livingston Parish directly into Tangipahoa Parish. But to get to it, you had to go to our old stomping grounds, and which is off of North Cafe Line Road. Now, if you go to Albany, or if you're going east on 190, which splits the whole Livingston Parish from East Baton Rouge to Tangipahoa, the last road on the left, you had to take a left, go over the railroad tracks, and it's a long straight road. Okay, that's North Cafe Line. But it's really rural. When you cross the railroad tracks, immediately there's some houses, like 4 houses on the right, and then on the left, you come to what they call E-Tops. It's this big bar that mainly did all their business on Sunday nights. All the blacks would come in from all different colleges from 3 states, and just, it was a shit show every Sunday night with, 1,000 cars and all that. But that's the story for another day. But you keep going straight down Cafe Lion Road, and there's a couple of houses, but mostly it's like cow pastures and shit. But then when you get about halfway down, you start passing up trailers on your right and a few houses on the left, and then you hit what we call the settlement, for a lack of a better term. And it was an all-black neighborhood, one of the only 2 on the east side of the parish. When you come into that neighborhood, you start passing up the trails on the right, and you're on North Cafe line. The only first right is Ed Brown Road. And so you take a right at that stop sign, it's Ed Brown, and you go straight and right at the parish line, Ed Brown crosses Drake. It's a 4-way stop. They call it the 4-way. In the hood, they call it the 4-way. And that is the absolute most known drug area on that side of the parish. Now, I'd say 50% of my foot pursuits and car chases and drug arrests, I've had pistols pulled on me there. All that happened right there in that hood, if you will. And I'm not being racist. I'm just telling you the story. But I was known down there. That's where I got the name The Wolf, because they said I was always down there hunting someone when I was in uniform patrol. But back in the uniform patrol days, right there, close to the 4-way, is where they all hung out on the weekends. Like if it's cold, they'd have a fire barrel. It's a couple little houses and maybe a trailer or 2 on the opposite side of the road, but they're all stacked in real tight together, right? But they would hang out there, and it was known that's where dope was sold. Okay. So people would come in from Tangipahoa side, the next parish over, they come in on the back roads and buy their dope right there. There and another one other place just a little bit further down on Cafe Line Road. But back in the day, I mean, it was known if you go down there after 11 o'clock at night, especially on a weekend, and it was reverse profiling, if you will. If you saw a white person coming through there, you knew their ass was buying crack. And this is what I'm talking about, my uniform patrol days before meth took over, but you knew they were buying crack, right? And you develop probable cause to stop them, and the shit show would start from there. But on this evening, I pull in, take that right on Ed Brown Road, and I pull almost down to the 4-way, but I couldn't get there because of all the police cars. Now, the crime scene tape, you know how I feel about that. You tape off everything, and the crime scene tape was already up, and it was extended across the road. The shooting happened on the left. If you headed towards Hampshire Parish, it's on the left-hand side of the road, and that lot, kind of where people hung out at, right? And that's kind of where the dope was sold. I walked up with my flashlight, and they had lights on the scene from the units and stuff, and I saw Brian Paul, and he walked me over to obviously what was a deceased black male laying on his back with his arms up almost in the Jesus position. Okay. Like that old Nestea tea commercial where the person falls backwards in the pool with their arms spread up like Jesus. And the deceased male was laying on his back like that with his arms spread wide open. And he was wearing blue jeans, like baggy blue jeans, with his underwear hanging out. And I think it was like a light blue shirt, but I'll never forget it. So we're looking at him, but then I could hear this other guy screaming in medical. The ambulance was working on him. Of course, Brian Paul, in any case like this, you call out everybody. We call it out Stan Carpenter. We call it out Ken McMorris, Ben Bourgeois. All the detectives would roll on a homicide, especially one down in a hood area like this. So other people are arriving. It's a fluid situation. We look at the deceased and go up to the guy that they're working on. I mean, and he was like, man, they fucking shot me, man. They fucking shot me. He fucking shot me. And he's screaming, and he had a big ass hole in his leg. I can tell you that. But they were lifting him up by the time I got there and wheeling him into the ambulance, and they would take him to North Oaks Hospital in Hammond, Louisiana, which was the closest hospital. Brian Paul was able to get his name before he left. It was Christopher Belazar, black male, early 20s. And he told me, so, he said, Belazar told me that he was standing here with the victim, the deceased, and he said 2 black males ran up on him and armed robbed him. And he said that then, for no reason at all, they started shooting. And he said when they started shooting, they ran. He said he thinks that the victim, whose name was Shun, S-H-U-N, Alberts, he said Shun went down immediately. He said, but the guy kept shooting and shot Belazar in the leg as he was running away from him. And Belazar ran into this little home that's right there. I think the lady's name was Sandra Allen. He didn't live there. He lived up in Independence, which is about 15 miles away from this location, north. He didn't know this lady. He just ran straight through her front door, and into the house bleeding. And we walked the trail. We're photographing it all and everything. And he busted open the door, and Sandra Allen woke up, and he was like, hey, call 911. I've been shot, and my buddy's dead. So she had actually was the one that called 911. And we talked to her, and she said, it's exactly like that, right? She said, I heard gunshots, plural, a lot of them. And then the next thing I know, somebody's running through my door telling me to call 911. She said I was scared. She didn't say shit. She said I was scared. And this guy's bleeding all over my floor, and he's laying there saying they shot me, and Shun is dead. Hey, y'all, it's definitely getting a little bit warmer outside, right? And who needs to spend time in the kitchen or in the grocery store? Well, you can save time with Factor. Factor can help you spend less time at home, in the kitchen, and more time enjoying your outdoor activities that you love, with no cooking, grocery shopping, or dishes. Plus the perfect health-conscious grab-and-go add-ons like smoothies and juices. Luckily, I don't have to meal plan or prep, and I can still eat well now that I leave my meals to Factor. Y'all, I have one of these smoothies every single morning. They're delicious. Factor makes it easy for me to eat clean 24/7 with fresh, never frozen prepared meals that are so delicious you wouldn't believe they're actually good for you. Feel good for summer? Choose from Factor's Calorie Smart and Keto options with built-in portion control as a great tool to help you get fit for summer. Factor offers over 30 meals per week where you can choose from a variety of new meals every week. On top of that, Factor gives you the option to change it up and select any plan size between 4 to 18 meals a week. Busy schedule for both lunch and dinner? No worries. Add an extra 2, 3, or even 4 meals to your order. Factor saves me time by delivering chef-crafted meals to my doorstep, eliminating the hassle of grocery shopping and meal prep, not to mention cleanup. No dishes to wash at all, y'all. Each Factor meal arrives pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes. That's even faster than ordering in or going through a drive-thru. Factor tackles the tough stuff, so I don't have to. Their registered dietitians and expert chefs work hand in hand to create meals with nutritious ingredients. Factor even knows my preferences. They offer vegan, veggie, meals, keto meals, low-calorie options, cold-pressed juices, smoothies, energy bites, plant-based bars, extra protein, veggie sides, and more to keep me fueled and focused all day long. Head to go.factor75.com/RLRC120 and use code RLRC120 to get $120 off. That's code RLRC120 at go.factor75.com/RLRC120 for $120 off. So we took a statement from her. By that time, the rest of the detectives had arrived on scene, and we took some photographs of the inside our house and the blood, and we walked back out, and you don't go right up to the body. Y'all, Sean Albers was dead on the ground. You could kind of look at it from 10 or 15 yards away, but we all huddled up. And of course, the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab worked all our murders, came out and collected evidence, etc. And they had been called, but it takes them a long time to get there, right? Whatever technician they have on the lab from the State Police Crime Lab that's on call, they get the call just like I did. And then they got to get up, get dressed, get in their vehicle, and shit, they might be in Lafayette or New Orleans, or they might be in Baton Rouge, or they might be in Livingston Parish. But it was the luck of the draw. But it usually took them at least an hour or so to get there. And then you knew the crime scene had to be worked. And time was on our side as far as it getting daylight. By this time, it's probably close to 6 a.m. We talked, the detectives talked, and Stan Carpenter, the chief of detectives, said, "Hey, look, I'm going to stay here with the guys, and we'll try to get witness statements from people, etc." He said, "Yeah, y'all go to the hospital in case that boy dies, and try to get a more detailed statement out of him when he's in better condition." So we did. Brian Paul and I drove to North Oaks. Took about 20 minutes tops to get there, and it was the old North Oaks, y'all, and not the new one in Livingston Parish. So we get there, we badge our way in to the emergency room, as we had so many times before. Anytime anything major happened on the east side of the parish and you're a detective, shit, you were at North Oaks Hospital. That's just the way it was. And we knew a lot of the people that worked there. And the charge doctor, I had become acquainted with him when we came in. He was actually coming out of the room, and I told him, he's like, "I guess y'all here for the shooting victim." And I said, "Yes, sir. And how you doing, et cetera." And he said he's going to make it. He said he's going to be fine. And he said, I don't know if we're going to have to do surgery or not. We're waiting on the x-ray, blah, 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 whatever. He said, "But y'all can go in and talk to him." So we go in, and he's laying in the bed, stripped naked. He had like a sheet on the, covering his crotch area, and he's laid back in bed. He's in a lot of pain still. They'd given him, so I think the doc said they'd give him some morphine or something, but he was cognizant, he was awake, and he was pissed. And so we introduced ourselves. Brian Paul introduced us, and he said, "Hey man, I talked to you briefly on the scene." He said, "The doctor says that you're going to live. They're going to take care of your leg, and we just need to know what happened." And this dude, he didn't want to talk, and he was like, "I'm gonna take care of this shit myself. I'm gonna take care of this shit myself." And I was like, "No." I said, "Listen, Hoss, you got a fucking hole in your leg. If you go and do some street justice bullshit, you're liable to catch a hole in your head." I said, "Just tell us what happened and let us do what we do." And he was crying. I think his girlfriend was there in the room also. He came around to it. I mean, he was scared, he was mad, he's upset, but he told us, he said, "Listen," he said, "this is some bullshit." He said, "I was standing in the lot right there, y'all. Well, I told you that. By Ed Brown and Drake." And he said, "Me and Shun, S-H-U-N, me and Shun were hanging out, and I saw this vehicle a dark colored vehicle come rolling past us from Tangipahoa Harris. He said it was dark colored, kind of went by slow, but not too slow. And it was headed towards North Cafe Line Road. And he said, we were just hanging out in the lot bullshitting. Well, I know what he was doing, right? Selling dope. He said, but Sean and I were just hanging out bullshitting. And he said, then I saw the vehicle come back by and head towards the 4-way, which is not even a 10th of a mile, y'all. That's that intersection I told you, Ed Brown and Drake. Half of Drake Road was Tangipahoa Parish, and the western half was Livingston Parish. He said the vehicle passed back by, and he said that within a minute or two, he said the N-word. He said these two ends rolled up on us. He said they were dressed in black. He said one of them was a dark-skinned dude, and the other one was more light complected. He said the dark-skinned dude had a big pistol, and he said the other guy was more light-skinned. He had a smaller pistol and cornrows in his hair. And he said the dark-skinned dude had what appeared to be a tattoo maybe underneath his left eye. Pretty fucking good descriptions, right? And he said the dark-skinned one, he believed he was from across the lake, which would, in the street terms, y'all, that meant New Orleans. And he said, I believe he's from across the lake. I believe he's Rodney Dillon's cousin. And but he rolled up on me and he put the pistol on me and he robbed me. He said, "I know what you got. He said, empty your pockets out." And he said he took like $300 off of me. He said, but Sean didn't have any money. And we were done. He was done robbing us. He got my money and we didn't do nothing. He said, and that nigga started shooting. And that's his words, y'all. He said that dude started shooting, but he used the N-word. He said he started shooting. He said when he shot Sean, pow, pow, real fast. He shot Sean at least twice. And he said, I turned and ran. And when I was running, he shot me. He shot a couple more times and one of them hit me in the leg. And he said, the only reason I'm not dead is that piece of shit pistol he had jammed on him. He said, and that's the only reason I'm not dead. So Brian Paul asked me, he said, can you describe the pistols? And he said, yeah. He said the one that the guy from across the lake had, he said it looked like almost like a machine gun. He said you held it with two hands and it had like holes around the end of the barrel. Y'all, it's like air ventilation thing. And he said it had a magazine in it, and that's what he did all the shooting. Pop, 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 pop. He said, but it jammed. So y'all, it turns out it was a Tech 9. Okay. A 9mm Tech, whatever the fuck they call it. It's the shittiest fucking gun in the world. It looks cool, but every shooting I was ever involved with, every homicide case I ever worked, every shooting case I ever worked with, a Tech 9 was involved, that motherfucker jammed. And if it had not jammed and been a piece of shit, Christopher Belazar would have been dead as fuck, and he wouldn't have been talking to us. And he said the other one was a smaller semi-automatic pistol like the ones that we carried. So when he told us who he thought it was, he said, I've seen that dude around. He's with Rodney Dillon before, and he said, I've seen him and I know he's from across the lake. And he said he didn't have to kill him, and he didn't have to kill Sean. He said, I gave him all my money. Sean didn't have a penny. And he was upset and he's pissed off. And I get that, right? But so we talked to him. We took the recorded statement from him and everything just in case he died. But what do we do now? Well, it's kind of pressing to find out who the fuck Rodney Dillon is and who his cousin is from across the lake, all right? So we can get a photo lineup. Now, this is a fluid situation. At some point, the crime lab arrives on scene, and we leave North Oaks Hospital. We go back over to the scene, huddle back up with everybody, tell them what we had. Now it's daylight, and you can see, like I told you, Sean was laid back in the Jesus position, and you could see the blood congealed on the ground below his back and below the back of his head. Okay. I didn't see any visible exit wounds, and y'all have the photographs. I didn't see any looking down at him. You could see blood, and his face was swollen, and I didn't see any visible exit wounds at that point in time. Right now, you don't touch the body. You don't just get there and start flipping it and shit. You go around and process all the evidence, looking for shell casings, which they recovered. Right. And they were 9mm, came back to, ended up being matched later on in this case to a Tech 9 through the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab's firearms unit. And they can tell by the casings, if let's say it's a 9mm, when they can tell by the striations on the bullet and stuff like that, they can match it to what what type of firearm. Each firearms manufacturer leaves almost like a fingerprint on the bullet if you can recover it in good enough condition to be matched to. And yes, it was a piece of shit Tech 9. So we briefed them on what we had. Brian Paul, let me digress for a little bit. We got this huge crime scene, right? And you got blue and whites out there keeping the people back. Now, don't forget this is a neighborhood, right? And, so people are out. Okay. And while we were there, I almost forgot this. While we were there, I think her name was Miss Allison. It's like 6:30, 7 o'clock, something like that. The Sean Albert's mama came up. Now she had a different last name than him. I think it was Collins, but she came up on the scene, and the deal was we knew this family. Both Brian Paul and I had arrested both of Sean's brothers, okay, on dope, selling dope right there on the corner, different times, foot per sale. I mean, I'm talking about like numerous times, but they liked us. I mean, if we were rolling through there and they weren't holding any dope, they didn't worry about it, right? Sometimes we'd get out and shoot the shit with them and hang out. Like if they had the fire barrel going during the wintertime, I'd pull up, they'd see me in the blue, I was in the blue and white in uniform, and I'd open the door. Sometimes I'd just open it, act like I was going to get out just to see if any of them would run, right? If they had warrants, usually they'd run, it'd be a foot pursuit and then a manhunt. Or sometimes I'd get out and none of them would have warrants, and I'd hang around the fire barrel for a little bit and shoot the shit with them. So I was cool with them. It was different policing back then. If I was getting my ass beat in that neighborhood, the good people would have came outside and helped me. And even the bad guys, if you will, the dope dealers, it was just a way of life. And they didn't have any animosity towards us. If you got into a foot pursuit with one of them and you got them and you got the dope on them, they didn't throw it, or they threw it and you recovered or whatever, you took them to jail. By the time you got done booking with them, you were cool, right? See you next time, cuz, right? So, and the streets talk, right? SCREETS. That's what they say down there. But we had arrested, and we had talked about this on the way to the hospital and back. Brian Paul's like, fuck, you know who that is? He said, it's Monkey and his brother. And I was like, really? And he said, I said, I've never seen him. He said, me either. He said, he's a good kid. I think he goes to college. He said, he's the only one in the fucking family who hadn't been arrested. I said, well, fuck, he's out here at 4:00 in the morning. If he wasn't slinging dope, then he was with somebody who was. He said, you're right. And he said, might have been wrong place, wrong time. But the mama comes up, and we knew her and had dealt with her before. And it's one of the hardest things in law enforcement when you have to tell a mother or a father or a family member that, yes, that body over there on the ground is your son. But we took her to the side and reintroduced ourselves, and she's crying and carrying on. No, please tell me it's not my baby. Please tell me it's not my baby. And I just hugged her up, like in a bear hug, and she was flailing her arms. And then the two brothers ended up coming up after we had told, but I told her, I said, I'm sorry. He's dead. I said, he's not coming back. And just held her. The human side of policing that you don't get to see, right? And the crying and somebody had gone and woke her up and told her. Now she lived, down Drake Road back in the corner that's where their house was, their trailer was. And I know that's because I'd done foot pursuits to her house before, but so I tell her, and then the boys show up and told them, and they were mad and crying and carrying on. They're like, Wolf, what is bullshit, man? And Brian went to school with the older ones, right? I mean, graduated from high school, I think, with some of them. But so then we told them, we went back to the other place and sat down and said, hey, this is it. He's not coming home. We're going to do everything we can to work this case and to get justice for Sean, right? But we also had to ask him a couple of questions. And so we took the brothers outside. Now, these are guys that we've arrested numerous times, and they've got a long history. I mean, it's just what they did. They sold dope, right? And we talked to them straight up and said, hey, man, what the fuck? What is Sean doing out there at 4 a.m? They said, Wolf, he ain't supposed to be there. He's the only one out of us that's any good. And of course, they're crying and they're mad and they want revenge. And then I'm going to find out who did it. I'm going to kill that motherfucker. I said, no, you're going to let us do our job, and we're going to get him. Right. And I said, but what is he doing? And he said, man, I don't know. I don't know what he was doing there at 4 a.m, but he wasn't supposed to be there. He said, all these years we stood on that corner and sold dope. All these years we never got murdered. And now the word had spread about that vehicle, and it turned out that the vehicle, when it passed remember Belzar said he saw the dark colored, I think it was like SUV, pass from the first time, headed towards Cafe Line Road and go out of sight. And he said in a couple minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, it turned around and came back. Well, the detectives have been talking to the people in the streets and they developed some witnesses. Now, we also had Rodney Dillon's name. Brian Paul knew Rodney Dillon's mama through an older brother they played football with or whatever. We had developed some people, and I'll get into that next week because it's a really important part of the story, that had saw the shooters moments before Sean Albert was murdered in cold blood. All right. They wrap up the scene. They tag him in bag, Sean, take him to the funeral home, put him in the cooler. You don't sleep on these cases, y'all. We got Rodney Dillon's address, which is actually in Hammond. So Brian Paul and I called the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, and they got the detective on call. Most of them were coming out at 8 o'clock anyway, and it's in the city limits of Hammond also. So we called them and got one of their detectives to come and meet us. As far as we know, the shooter's at this fucking house, right? So we crept up on the house and took tactical positions. You never stand in front of a window. You don't stand in front of the doorway. And we got to the side of the door and knocked on it. And it's an older brick home in a decent neighborhood in Hammond. And finally, the lady came to the door, and I can't remember her name. I'll have to look it up. Rodney Dillon's mama came to the door, and like I said, Brian Paul knew her, and he's like, hey, sweetie, how you doing? And she's like, what you doing here, boy? And he said, man, we're here on something serious. And he said, is Rodney or anybody else in the house? No, there ain't nobody here. They left yesterday evening. And he said, well, can we come in and talk to you? She said, yeah. And he said, you don't mind if we search the house real quick, make sure nobody snuck in while you were sleeping, right? Because she was in her house robe. And she said, yeah, you go look. I don't care. And then now this is a good woman, right? I think she taught school or something for 40 years or something like that. But we went in, cleared the house, and then go into the living room, and Brian Paul told her what happened. He said, look, we're working a murder on Ed Brown and Drake. And she said, oh, Lord. And she said, how is Rodney involved? And he said, well, we don't know that Rodney's directly involved, but do you know where he is? And she's like, I could try to call him. And Brian said, does Rodney have a cousin from across the lake that's been staying with him? And she said, yeah, sure he does. And his cousin Mo has been staying here. And she said, that boy's trouble. She said, he's trouble. The reason he's staying here is because he had to come across the lake because he was in trouble in New Orleans. And I'm letting him stay here to try to get his life right. And she said, what happened? She said, they killed somebody. And I was like, we don't know for sure, Miss Dillon. We're working, and one of the witnesses said that he believed that one of the shooters was from across the lake and was a cousin to Rodney. And she said, you got a description on him? And I said, yeah, shorter, dark skinned male with like a tattoo under his eye. She said, oh, Jesus. She said, that's him. She said, ain't no tattoo. He's got a scar underneath his left eye. She said, that boy, I don't know what to do with him. And I said, well, look, the main thing is we don't know for sure that it was him, but what's his real name? And she said, it's Majori Chefney. Now, I couldn't spell that shit for you today. I couldn't spell it for you. I couldn't spell it back then, but I had to write it. Majori, Medjoure, Chefney. And I think it was like Cheffany, or something like that. She said, that's Majori Chefney. And he's staying here. He's getting his life straight. And he can't go back across the lake. Again, across the lake meant New Orleans. Because he's in trouble across the lake. Well, what would we do? I get on the phone. I call the radio room. Oh, I got his approximate date of birth. Call the radio room. I said, listen, can you please pull up Majori Chefney? I had her spell it for me and gave the approximate date of birth, and boom, immediately he's wanted out in New Orleans. He's a young cat, but he's got a long, distinguished murderous career, not by murder, but violent career. And he had warrants for his arrest out of NOPD, New Orleans Police Department at that time. And I said, listen, give me that stuff. And Tina Pearson, she was already at the office. She's Stafford now. Tina Stafford, it's Tina Stafford. She's Pearson now. Tina Stafford Pearson, I called her with the information and I said, get us a lineup. And so she did. And we talked to we got the phone numbers, tried to call Rodney. He didn't answer. Tried to, call whatever other numbers that she had for us. And Miss Dillon, she was a sweetheart. She cooperated 1000%. And, no joy, right, on the phone numbers or anything else. So we took her statement about who he was and what have you, and then thanked her, and we left. And we thanked the Hammond City and the Tangipahoa detective. We went to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, the detective's office, and Tina had 6 packs of Majori Chefney, and she did one for Rodney Dillon also. It drawn up, it's photographic lineups, all it is. And the Louisiana State Police uses a computer that you put in this guy's real ID, and it pulls up 5 people that look just fucking like him. Now, it's kind of hard to get 5 people with a scar underneath their eye, but I mean, it is what it is. It kind of excludes that, if you will, because that's an anomaly. But the other people, they look just like him. I mean, I couldn't have told you who it was if it hadn't been for the scar. But we get that. What do we do then? We haul ass back to North Oaks Hospital, where Christopher Belazar has now been admitted to a room. All right. And we get there. He was sleeping. We go up to his room. He's sleeping, and woke him up. and he had a through and through in the leg when he was really lucky. The bullet went in and went out. It didn't tear up anything major. He didn't have to have major surgery. They stitched him up, etc. But they were keeping him for observation. But so, hey, Chris, we want to show you a photo lineup or some photo lineups. We don't want you to guess. We want you to only pick the person who shot you and shot Sean out of the lineup if you are 1,000% sure. So sure that you could get on the stand in court and testify, yes, this is the person that did it. So I don't want any guesses. I don't want it. If you have a guess, don't even say it. Just say, I don't know. All right. And he was like, yeah, just show it to me. And so Shadow popped it down. And I mean, he sat up in the bed and he slammed his hand on the picture. And I think he was in slot 5. He slammed his hand on the 6-pack, the 6 pictures on slot 5. He said, that's him. And he said, that's the N-word that killed Sean and shot me. He said, and then the only reason I'm not dead is that pistol jam that he had. So that's it. And then I showed him the 6-pack with Rodney Dillon, and he said, and then he picked out Rodney Dillon. He said, but he said, I don't know why you showing me that, because Rodney wasn't there. He said he wasn't that other dude with the cornrows in his hair. He said Rodney was not there. He said, but that other N-word, he said he was there. He said, that's the dude that shot me. So what do? We go back to, then we'll get the statement and give them the circle and initial and date it and write a statement stating that Majority Cheffney was the one that did the armed robbery and the shooting. And we went back to the courthouse and had Tina draw warrants for the 1st-degree murder, because the murder occurred during the commission of an armed robbery. 1st-degree murder for Sean Alberts, and attempted 1st-degree murder for Christopher Belazar, and 2 counts of armed robbery, 1 for Sean and 1 for Christopher Belazar. Then we had to go find a judge, and I think it was Judge Zoe Wagasback that signed it. And she wasn't in yet. We had to go to her house and do the probable cause statements, etc. Boom, we got our warrants. Now, put them go back to the radio room, have them enter the warrants into the NCIC computer, National Crime Information Computer, which says, hey, anybody that stops Majority Cheffney, or Mo, that's what his street name was, Mo, or New Orleans. But anybody that stopped Mo, they know he's wanted for 1st-degree murder and a plethora of other charges. So I'm going to stop this episode here for this week. Y'all, you got to hear what happens in this case. It's just crazy. But it was good police work. It's a great case. I actually have transcripts of 6 different interviews and actually interrogations that we did in this case. And then I have a plethora of information, a lot that we're going to be putting up for Patreon and Convicts. So y'all get to see all the stuff. Okay. And I'm Woody Overton, your host of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. Real quick on LOPA, Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. I'm about to leave for Wisconsin to go hunt with the winner of the LOPA raffle that was donated by McLaurin Whitetail Adventures out of Wisconsin, Tomah, Wisconsin last year. And they donated a whitetail hunt and a turkey hunt, a 4-day guided turkey hunt. And that person has chosen to go at the end of this week. And the part of the deal was I'm going to go up there and cook for them. So LOPA, y'all, they're heroes. Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. That's my jam. You know that. And I'm always going to talk about them. And if you're not an organ donor, please go sign up. If you're a lifer from New Zealand and you want to become an organ donor, please go to lopa.org, fill out the form. It takes like 2 minutes, and you can be an organ donor. You don't have to be from Louisiana. So be a hero, be an organ donor. And I'm Woody Overton, your host of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. Until next time or ever, don't let me catch you down on Murder Bayou. Peace. Real Life, Real Crime is a true crime podcast brought to you by your host, Woody Overton, executive producer, Jim Chapman with Envision Podcast Studios. Your music is provided by Chase Tyler and the Chase Tyler Band. Follow me on Instagram at Real Life, Real Crime or at Overton Woody. Check out our numerous social media pages. Also, go to the App Store and download our free Real Life, Real Crime community app, which contains all things real life, real crime and true crime, and uncensored and run by me. Wherever you listen to a podcast, go like, subscribe, and review to Real Life, Real Crime or my other podcast, Scorched Justice. Thank you. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney prior to and during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?